I can go ahead and admit everybody who's kicking this off.
I don't
I
know.
believe Lindsay.
Do you want me to go through like the housekeeping items that Bailey sent?
Yeah,
Like
Um,
updates on Vision Walk? Oh,
there she is. Okay.
Sorry guys, my meeting ran over. Hi
no
everyone,
problem.
it's
Hi.
Bailey. I can actually go through the housekeeping items, Lindsay. I won't make
Okay.
you talk through the whole thing. And once again, I apologize. It's been that kind of day where everything bounces back up to each other. All right. Um, all right, perfect. And I'm pulling up my notes here. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. We have a good number of people who are on today. So this is Bailey. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get jumped in with our session today is that exciting news. As many of you know, the Vision Walk season has officially begun. We had our first one in Austin, San Antonio. So that's the one that's going to cause all the trickle effects of all these other great ones that you'll see throughout the communities. Between now and our next call in April, we'll have 6 additional walks that are going to take place. So I'm sure that all of you are gearing up to the ones that are happening in your backyard and getting all excited for those pieces. I also wanted to share some exciting news with you all as well. We will have 2 new community managers joining our team next Monday. So we'll introduce them to you all on our next chapter leaders call, but just wanted to go ahead and give you a heads up if you hear any new names floating around. So we will have an individual joining us who is going to be covering the South Florida chapters. So that will be Naples, Orlando, Miami, Boca, those areas. And then we also have a community manager who is going to be covering our New England area chapter. So that'll of course be our Boston chapter primarily and Maine. So exciting news, our team is still growing. Another reminder is that on April 24th, we will be having our quarterly Insights Forum call. So please make sure to keep an eye out for that because you'll want to be able to join that and get some updates on what's happening at the foundation. Usually there's some research updates shared of what's happening in this space. So it's always good to get caught up on where things are. And then last reminder and for here is that we now have the recording ready for the AMD webinar that we hosted last month. So that webinar brought in, we had almost 300 day of attendees and we had over 800 people register. So another really exciting way for us to engage with the local community. But that webinar is recorded and saved on our YouTube as well as our website. So if you know anyone in your community who would like to learn more about AMD, that's a great resource to be able to share with them. I also want to get on your radar as well is that we will be hosting our next quarterly vision webinar on May 17th. And this one is going to be focused around mental health. So it'll be of a bit of a unique topic than some of what we have covered in the past, but we'll have some great experts in the mental health space come on and share about managing your mental health while living with low vision and navigating those changes. But other than that, Lindsay, I'm gonna go ahead and throw it over to you and Frank. So for those of you who maybe have not had the pleasure of working with Lindsay and Frank, Lindsay is our Central Regional Development Assistant and Frank is our Mountain Community Manager. And so they're gonna talk a little bit today about sharing your story, which I think is such an important piece as everyone's out in the community to figure out how do I talk about why I'm connected to FFB, and what good can talking about my personal journey help with others? So, Lindsay, the floor is yours.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Bailey. As Bailey said, I'm the RDA in the Central Region, and we're going to have a little bit of a casual call today. So again, as Bailey said, we're going to be talking about sharing your story, and we'll focus mostly on two perspectives, one as with affected family and one as with self-affected. But of course, if you are just an advocate in this space or work in this space, you can also think through some of these tactics for how you share your involvement as well. Most of you have probably already shared your story, whether it was with friends, family, or physicians. How and why you share has likely changed over the years and the course of your family or your diagnosis. So again, this call is going to be casual. I just want to reiterate, if there's at any point you'd like to have a question or discussion, please let us know, because we really want to encourage dialogue and sharing, as again, our topic is very pertinent towards being open and honest with each other. So I first became involved with Foundation in 2020, and that was when I received a diagnosis in my family. That was also during the pandemic, and I was seeking connection and information and resources around our diagnosis. At that time, I was not comfortable at all sharing our story beyond immediate family on almost a need-to-know basis. I'm sure some of you can relate. It was at the time we were going through so much of our process of acceptance and understanding ourselves that fielding questions and concern from family and friends was completely overwhelming. For me, I think the first time that I truly shared our story was the first time that I spoke with a staff member at FFB when I was wanting to get involved. So being able to share with an individual that was not invested in my family member, but listened from a place of neutrality while still being fully versed in the world of IRDs, which was still very new to us, was incredibly comforting, and honestly was a lot of the impetus of becoming super involved with the foundation. So after that initial phone call, I got involved in my Austin chapter. I soon became the Austin chapter president, and I'm not sure if any of y'all can relate to this, but at the time, I actually felt a lot of guilt accepting that position. I was still in a place that sharing our story broadly was not something that I was ready to do. So I felt like I was not the right fit. I was seeing others in the space that were sharing with their social networks, having 20 plus members of their walk team, and that just wasn't something that I was ready to do. I also was asked to speak at that first walk, and truthfully, I didn't know what to say. But after spending some time talking with my husband and also speaking with my manager, I decided that a lot of how I was going to approach this was how I approach many things in my life. And that was finding my comfort level and remembering that quality sometimes exceeds quantity. And that's where I found the most connection in sharing my story, when I was doing so intimately with people I was close to or with people that shared my same experience. So I decided that broadly, I was going to share that my family was affected, that getting a diagnosis was isolating and discouraging, but finding the foundation allowed us to feel connected and hopeful. And so if anyone is in this current space where it's hard and almost too vulnerable to share details of your experience, your family's experience, I think finding a way to present it and just giving your connection to the cause without giving too much detail, and then bringing it back to the foundation and what our true mission is. So that's what really helped me. I remember in my walk speech, I initially said my family's affected. That's what gave me kind of the impetus to be up there. But then I quickly shifted gears into the broader mission of the foundation. And then in 2022, I did find a way that I could utilize my platform and have a larger reach and a broader audience while still avoiding, again, that direct attention on my family by partnering with an athlete in the low vision community on a DIY called Finding the Light. And I'll be sharing a lot more about that campaign on our chapter leaders call about our DIY program. So a little plug to stay tuned. That will be coming later this year. But essentially, my husband and I are video contractors for CrossFit. And so we produce a lot of content for them. And we had approached our boss about doing a profile on Kim DeCarroll, who's an adaptive CrossFit athlete and competes in their vision division and was the fittest blind female in 2021. So what we did is we created that profile and released it along with a workout. So in the caption, like on our Instagram post or in emails, we created a workout that we encouraged all CrossFit affiliates and athletes to do during the month of October for Blindness Awareness Month. And we had hashtags and people were doing the workout, posting it, sharing with Kim. And that way I was able to almost speak through Kim and connect with a much broader audience, including her social network as well as CrossFit's. And so that was a way that I was able to combine something I was already interested in, CrossFit, and partially as a job, and then also this cause that was so near and dear to my family. But again, I let Kim be the presence and the spokesperson. And that was something that was really helpful for me. And, along the way, Kim and I have also developed a beautiful friendship. And I look forward to having her as a mentor and role model for my family in the future, which again was another reason that I became so involved with the foundation in the first place. So what I'd like you to take away from this is that there's really not one right way to share your story. Sharing your story is deeply personal, and it's personal to you and what your comfort level is. And that probably will change over time as well. Truthfully, a lot of my hesitancy to share is that the people in my family that are affected are young and they don't fully understand their disease. And so I want them to be involved with the foundation and be a voice for the foundation if and when they choose. And so, because for me, as with family affected, it's my story, but I don't know if some of you can relate to this. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's my story to tell. I'm along for this ride, and it's been a very big part of my life, but essentially, I am not the one firsthand experiencing vision loss. But for now, I have found a way that I am comfortable with to be able to move the mission and stand in the space. And again, that's utilizing Kim's voice and a broader reach through CrossFit every October. I do attend all of our local events and speak at my comfort level at those events every spring. And just essentially remembering that you can be an advocate in the space without bringing it so close to you if you don't choose to. It's really about making sure that we continue to, as a collective group, advocate and normalize and even celebrate differences so that every member of my family and everyone in the low vision community as a whole continue to feel loved and accepted every day, no matter their abilities. So with that, if there's any questions right now, I would welcome any, but if not, I will pass it along to Frank.
Can you hear me, Lindsay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. I don't know, did we get any questions or should I proceed?
I don't see any questions, so I think go ahead.
We'll keep moving along. Lindsay and I have known each other for a bit now, and we've had the good fortune to work with each other through Kim DeCarroll and the Adaptive CrossFit Games. And I'm struck by how much more complicated it can be when your story is a little bit third person. I would argue that Lindsay and her family's story is as first person as it gets. Lindsay and I did some prep work for this call, and I I'm not a parent, but I think anybody that is a parent or knows a parent understands that there's actually I don't know, there's something even closer than first person, which is when you're a parent to a child that's impacted by something. I think, yeah, to know parents is to know that that actually is even more personal than something that impacts themselves. So it's a real pleasure to hear, yeah, the other perspective of how you navigate, with a young child who doesn't yet have the personal, decision-making agency to say what it is that they want and don't want disclosed. Because at the end of the day, this is personal, private information for some people, who, despite the fact that there's a lot of good that can come from sharing your story, that doesn't make it always the right decision for everybody. And I guess I will leave it at that and revisit that in my own experience, but just to introduce myself, my name is Frank Moore. I am located in Denver, Colorado. I am the community manager here in the Mountain West. So it's Denver and Arizona, which I'm biased, but they're incredible chapters full of really wonderful, highly motivated people. but I think that that's a through line throughout the entire organization. So I will, yeah, I will not detract from any other chapters. But this position is something like it's a bit of a late in life career change for me. I'm not trained to do this work. People who've worked with me might might say that that is apparent from time to time, but I'm actually trained originally as a medical doctor, which kind of also gives me some experience in the boundary setting around what you do and don't disclose, maybe for different reasons. But I guess to start, I will just say that my own story is that, and this will be brief, but is that I have a late onset form of Stargardt's disease. I did not know that I had it until I hit like my late 30s. And by that time, I was fully trained and practicing as a medical doctor in a private practice group. And my area of medicine was very visually dependent. I was diagnosing cancer and margining cancer and working with labs to do genetic testing, not unlike some of the testing we offer here at the foundation. And so when I got the diagnosis, it was really shocking. And understanding it from a medical perspective, I knew that it was a progressive condition and I knew that it would impact my career. So I think Lindsay described some of her approaches and strategies to life. Mine are probably going to sound a little bit more like coping mechanisms, to be perfectly honest, but I tend to intellectualize things. And so I immediately said, okay, I'm going to retrain, I'm going to go back to school in my 40s, which I do not recommend. And so I went back and got a public health degree, and I worked at a couple of other NGOs doing international healthcare, and ultimately was really lucky to find my way to the foundation, where I do get to share my story all the time. And I think Lindsay pointed out it's a dynamic process, it changes over time. There's certain parts of it that don't. The facts rather than the narrative part, those remain the same. But the stories we tell ourselves versus the truth, hopefully those are really well aligned. But we all have bits of personal narrative that are woven into how we share this type of information. So I, yeah, I was a late in life diagnosis, so there was no issue of me being like a minor child or, having decision-making capacity. I was fully able to share my story, but while I was practicing medicine, I didn't. And for the second time in my life, I found myself in this position where I felt like I couldn't disclose something about myself that probably would help people make a little bit more sense of me personally. It was not impacting my professional work. I was seen out of state and given clearance to work, but there is a liability issue working as a doctor, even with a diagnosis that has visual impairment attached to it. So I did not disclose it until I was ready to leave my career, until I, had another physician, an eye doctor, say it's time. Actually, it's ahead of time because we can't wait until you lose your vision. We have to leave this career before. So it was complicated during those times. My closest friends and they knew, and it was important to share it with my family since this is an inherited condition and there's young children in my family. So there was a period of time where I wasn't able to really share the full story. And I guess again, to speak to Lindsay's point, that can be really complicated. But what I've learned through sharing my experience of Stargardt's at the foundation, pre-foundation, just are sort of a set of preferred practices. I think that we all have our own style and how we communicate and our whys. And I think there's a ton of really good whys. Obviously, you can have an impact on fundraising. It's important to have visibility for a relatively small community. This is not, like cancer research where, there are a lot of people speaking and advocating on its behalf. This is a relatively small group of people that are impacted, even if you include family and support systems. So there's a lot of really good reasons to share. There are obviously some reasons that we don't share, including personal boundaries or, professional limitations or just disclosing personal, private medical information. But once you've arrived personally at sharing the story and you're convinced of the importance and the benefit of sharing your story, I think what I have found is that, again, I tend to be more of a fact than narrative person when I share, what this mission means to me. It's not to say that narrative isn't good. I think that, we again have to weave some of that in there, but there are certain facts that I want people to understand because that's what impacts me. So we all bring a little bit of ourself into our sharing, our storytelling. And I think too, I try to avoid any type of reductive language. I was just recently talking to Nathan about an interaction that I had professionally at the National Federation of Blind. Um, it's really clear that, while we want to have impact in our sharing, and we want to make sure that people understand the, these IRDs are something worth researching and seeking out treatments and cures. We want to be really careful to not diminish people in some reductive way into a blind person only or a low vision person only. And to be honest, I think the flip side of that is that that can lead to a lot of stress for people as we share this experience, but also as sharers. I worry about sorry. I worry about off-putting for people being worried about how to then interact with me, and being correct in their language and appropriate. And I have to say, I don't know what other people's excuses are, but I mean, overwhelmingly, my experience is that, you know, people are trying very hard to meet you where you are, and they're trying to use the right language, and they overall really, really want to be good stewards of the mission, and they want to hear what you're saying. So I try to put people at ease because I think it can be a heavy, difficult conversation sometimes. I also try to, I guess, like I try my personal style is not to be particularly performative when I share. So I don't personally have a lot of like dramatic pauses for effect or anything like that. Like I said, I tend to share personal feelings and facts and leave it at that. I share that as like a preferred practice only because I think it's important, irrespective of how you share your story, to remember that the story does most of the work. Your delivery doesn't have to be perfect, and in fact, I don't think people expect it or want it to be. It's that I know it's an overused word, but it's that personal authenticity that really, really lands for people. So I would say a fully scripted, delivery that is, totally perfect, it may be less good than the one that you're already in possession of. So yeah, and I would also say just one of the last ones is don't bury the lead. A lot of times, and I think implied in why we share our stories, is that there's an ask, and that can make us feel a little bit insecure. The lead in that is not the ask. The lead is your personal experience in your story. So don't bury that. Start there. The ask becomes a lot easier. And oftentimes people will ask for the ask, which is like fully self-actualized communication. It's so much easier when people bring you there to say, well, how can I help? That's like, you've done your job, and then it's the story is landed. So those are kind of my preferred practices. And I would just say, like, finally, there's no wrong way. I know that we say that about a lot of things, but there really isn't. And the one that lands best is probably the one that reflects your personal experience of this, whether it's first, second, or third hand. You should never be afraid to share this mission, even if you're not directly impacted. The why of our mission is one of the best parts about the foundation, is that, I think most people can hear that and say, hear why we do what we do, and get on board that it's not a hard ask. Um, and yeah, again, personal authenticity, having your story really reflect who you are and what your lived experience of it is probably the biggest preferred practice. So yeah, those are my those are my takeaways. I will give it back, the floor that is, and it is really, really nice to have the opportunity, Lindsay. Thanks for asking.
Of course. Thanks for sharing.
Lindsay,
Yes.
this is Tim Smith in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. I don't have a question, but I just want to say thank you both for opening up like this and sharing your stories. I think that having the two of you out there sharing your stories benefits all of us. They both felt very authentic, heartfelt, vulnerable. I saw a speaker yesterday talking about the importance of vulnerability, and that vulnerability is not a weakness as it's often seen or believed to be. And I think that the vulnerability in this case shows the strength and the reason to share a story and how important it is. So thank you both for doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback.
Lindsay.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lindsay, this is Dan Day. I'll just echo what Tim said. Thank you to both you and Frank. Those certainly really good words today. And I guess I do have a general question, not necessarily just for the two of you, but maybe Bailey and the other staff members. I know for the last couple of years, I think October is October Vision Awareness Month or Blindness Awareness Month? Vision Awareness. Okay,
All of these
maybe
are,
both.
yeah.
Probably both, I guess. And for the last couple of years, we've done Share Your Vision, where you can make a video, you can make an audio, or even just a written statement if you want about that is your opportunity to share the story. So if we're going to do it again this year, I'll put in a little plug for it. You can do it, as I say, you can do it a number of ways. I made an audio, and in fact, the way I made the audio was about 5 minutes long, and I went ahead and just recorded some MP3s, about 5 or 6 of them, so that I could get the words right and make it flow correctly. And then Chris Adams helped me, help me edit it and put it together so that it came out right. But I found it useful. I found it useful since I made that video because, number one, it's sharing your vision and sharing your story and putting it out there. But then when I send out emails, let's say an email to solicit for some support for the Vision Walk, I can say you can hear my story at this URL, or I can even use it on general emails for other things, make it a part of my signature block or whatever to say, hear my story. And it gives you the opportunity to actually let people go out there and listen, if, keep it short and that sort of thing, to go out and hear your story without you're having to repeat it over and over again to people. So I would encourage people to think about that if they do it again this October, to go ahead and think about what you would say and put your story out there. And so again, thanks, both Lindsay and Frank. I can relate to Frank what you said, because I too am not a person who wears his heart on his sleeve, as it were. And I tend to be a bit clinical and intellectual about or intellectualize things. And so I tend to present things that way. But still, if you put some thought into it, you can still come across, I think, as being very sincere and tell a good story. So thanks again.
And Dan, this is Bailey. So I love the plug of the Share Your Story that you did just now. So I am 99% sure we will definitely be doing that again this October. But also just to let you all know that you don't have to wait until October. So on our website, and we'll put this in the follow-up notes, and I'll also drop it in the chat, we still have the page live for being able to share your story. So on the page we have that's on our website, it even includes some templates. So if you're not sure where to start, but you want to, take a try at crafting your story, there's some different templates on here for either writing your story, recording a voice recording of your story, or even videoing your story, so that way you don't have to start from scratch as you're trying to craft out this message. So thank you, Dan, for that plug. We'll make sure to send more information to you all with that as well.
And I assume too, Bailey, that the Share Your Vision, the web page and what they call the gallery, is still there. So if people want to get ideas about how to share your story, you've got lots to choose from. There are a lot of them out there, and there is no right or wrong way to share your story. People have done it in a humorous way, some in a more serious way. It depends on the situation, as Frank and Lindsay were mentioning. If you're a parent, you've got a different story to tell than a person who's affected, and everybody's at a different place with their journey. So you can get lots of great ideas out there at the current gallery if you wanna go there and take a look.
Hi, this is Davida. I'd like to jump in for 2 reasons. Frank, want to say hello, welcome. It is my brother Jonathan, who's biking across the country, who you might be connecting with at some point. So for those who don't know, so whoop. Okay, I'm gonna kill, okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
We
Davita,
can-
you're good.
Okay, great. Okay, because my phone computer got weird for a second. So ironically, Jonathan's departure date is April 25th, and his dumb sister very belatedly figured out that is quite ironic because that is the day I called in 20 years ago to talk to Pat Dodd and say, "Hi, I want to start the Northern Virginia chapter." So a little irony there. But in terms of my story, working and connecting to another group that Bailey and I have been kind of connected through, Judy Cal's Good Egg group. We were, reviewing letters and stories, and as a result of that process, 20 years in, or actually 19, I had the idea to kind of create to put somebody in my shoes in my first sentence and to make it a title. So I have in quotes, imagine you go to the eye doctor and you think you need reading glasses and he comes in and says, no, you're going blind. That was the beginning of and that's just the quote. And then somebody else, I was working with another group and we were massaging letters, and she actually did a lot of work with direct mail and commented that, when possible, and very often when there are direct mail pieces and that there's an ask, there often is a title used to kind of catch somebody's attention immediately. So I throw that into the mix of the ideas that we're sharing today. And as Dan and everybody else has said, it's all personal. There's no right or wrong. You do just what comes naturally and feels right. And honestly, when you hit the mark of what works for you, it will just flow. I wrote that piece in about 30 seconds from start to finish. It just happens.
That's a great tip, Davita. Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions or maybe even experiences of you sharing your story where, you are taking that leap of faith to go out there and share why you're involved with the foundation?
This is Erica.
Hey, Erica.
Hey, I'm new from the Dallas Fort Worth chapter. I kind of just wanted to have a reaction to Frank's point. I am a part of the National Federation of the Blind, the Dallas chapter, as well as the Texas chapter, and that's unfortunate what you encountered because the National Federation of the Blind, our motto is you can live the life you want. Blindness does not hold you back. So I'm saddened that someone else reflected something otherwise.
Oh, Frank, you're muted.
Sorry, I
you
don't
go.
see these buttons very well. To be fully transparent, they were responding to some of our marketing a long time ago
Mm-hmm.
that, I think they felt painted
Oh,
blind in a
the
diminutive
How I
way.
See It campaign.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was
No.
their response,
That was
and they
infamous.
projected nothing in that meeting. They really said nothing but kind things about FFB. They were incredibly gracious to have me and also one of my colleagues earlier on in the year or late last year into their facility, which is the Colorado Center for the Blind, which is a really big NFB initiative. There's two big on-site training centers, one in Louisiana, which is my home state, and Colorado, which is my current state. And they are, it's interesting because I struggle a little bit with my own ableist views. And one thing I didn't get too deep into, but Lindsay shared using a proxy, sort of finding this athlete in Kim DeCarroll and putting her sort of in front of the message and saying, look, And I find I do that sort of the same way. I say when I talk about my low vision, I say, but I can still mountain bike and I can still ski and I can still do all these things, which is, psychologically, that's me, trying to present this version of myself that is, very able. And I find that the NFB is further along in that process and does it way better than I do when I kind of like trot out these look, I can do these things. They just kind of live in that space, which is we can do all of these things. We don't want to be painted in any type of diminutive way. And I think that that was helpful to hear. And I don't think, FFB doesn't currently message that. That's not in any of our messaging since I've been at this organization or been even the personal commentary from anybody at this organization. But that was the context of that comment.
Greg, this is Bailey. I think one thing that you mentioned there that I think is a really unique takeaway for everybody is that it's not that the low vision is Frank, but Frank is all these other things as well. Frank is a mountain biker. Frank is a, former doctor. Frank is a great advocate. And so instead of saying that, an individual is just the low vision condition, but there's all these other great things as well. So I think those are nice to be able to share when you share your story with people. Ryan, I noticed that your hand was up. I don't know if you had a comment or question.
Well, now I feel like you're forcing me to talk and say my story. I guess I will. Now, listen, I've said a lot. I have RP, but RP does not have me. So Frank, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I think I tend to use humor, to get my point across. Also because it's hilariously weird to be me anyways. Like, I walk into crap all the time. And these are just facts of our lives, right? So, I think I could spend a lot of my time being angry and upset about that, it is what it is, right? But I think, a lot of what my story has come from is I got tired of people thinking that I'm just some drunk guy when I'm out in public and I'm not even having anything to drink. No, I just walk slow and hug walls because, it's an easy way to get around. I will say, thanks to FFB and some other local stuff, I'm here in the Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area. I have finally started using a white cane, which is a whole new adventure. So we're working through that a little bit. But to your point, to Lindsay's point, I think it's the story does tell itself. I think it's a lot of everything I say are actual real things that have happened and how they happen. Sometimes for me being a little less clinical and finding those right times to pause for effect, that can help too. But yeah, I hear you. It's either way. I think we have a responsibility to make sure folks that are like us that haven't seen us yet, make sure that they can find us along the way too, for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. Sarah, I noticed your hand's up.
Hey, yeah, my name's Sarah Bertram. I'm the Minnesota chapter president. And in the community, I'm kind of, I'm known as Matthew's mom. Matthew's my son. He has a diagnosis. He's 9. And we're not, shy to talk about it. We're very noticeable. He's super cute with the cane. So everybody kind of knows us. But at work, I sort of have a different life where it's not that I don't talk about it. It's just that it just doesn't come up. I guess I really don't talk about it. But I took a leadership training a couple weeks ago, and we were asked to present, just a little brief bio, some things about you, some spotlights you've had with leadership. And I really felt compelled in that moment to talk about my time with the foundation and being the Vision Walk chair and kind of doing the press circuit with my son. And when I talked about it and just shared a little bit of his story, which is my story too, I really liked how you guys kind of talked about that today, it was an interesting point. How parents can be perhaps sometimes more affected than children that are affected too, because of all the things that we're going through, all the changes that we've experienced with the thoughts and dreams that we had for our kids, which are still there, just realigned now. And that's usually what I talk about with people in my community. But when I mentioned it in the workplace at this leadership training, at the end of the day, and like I said, it just kind of came out. I did not plan to, but the words just happened. And I was like, cool, let's just go with it. At the end of the day, a woman came up to me that I didn't know. She had flown in from California and said, I really want to get to know you. My husband recently lost his vision in his retirement age, can't drive anymore. And we are just navigating this whole new life. And I just feel like I need to cling to you. And I just instantly snapped into, okay, I normally talk with, young people or their parents, but really all ages, but, people that have children with diagnosis is kind of my specialty since that's the world that I know. But I just instantly started asking her, have you had genetic testing? Do you know what he has? Do you know what his gene is? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, yes, she's already been connected with her foundation Fighting Blindness in California. So it's just been the start of an amazing relationship. And it really makes sense to me why the words just came out. And I'm really glad that I didn't stop them.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And I think that's a really great point, is that you never know what someone else might be experiencing in their personal life. So by sharing your story, it might open up the conversation, just like you experience in your workplace.
And this is Dan again. I'll just add one thing to that too, Bailey. I think we talk about how everybody's story is different. When you meet someone with whom your story closely aligns with theirs, then that aspect of empathy really comes through. And that's really important, I think. It's one thing when two people have, they have two different stories and maybe they're not all that similar, or they're just personalities. They don't empathize that much together. But when you do, I think it can be really, really effective and helpful for both people. They just feel like it's a person they can talk to and a person they can commiserate with or whatever. But also, I know in all my work, reaching out to people, when I find someone that has a similar journey, then they really develop a stronger affinity to the foundation, usually because of it, just because then they understand there are a lot of people here that can relate to them. So I think seeking out those people that you can really empathize with is key here in getting your story across and making it impactful.
Definitely. Eric, do I notice your hand up?
Yeah, you do. I can never figure out how to raise my hand virtually, but yeah, that was my hand. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Eric Bernardo, Pittsburgh chapter president. Yeah. So, excuse me, just to share a little bit about my experience with sharing my story. About 4.5 years ago, I started a YouTube channel, really focusing on talking about my life as it relates to retinitis pigmentosa. And over time, it kind of evolved into just sort of like talking about my life and sort of throwing in elements of vision loss and RP into it. And 151 videos later, here we are. But it's definitely been a great journey in sharing my experience there, sort of in different contexts. Some videos I'll talk about what I did in the past month related to my activities here at FFB, with my job and business ventures, and just how everything kind of ties into each other. And I grew pretty comfortable, talking in front of an unknown audience, because YouTube's pretty about as public as it gets. And then that kind of evolved into Bailey and I giving a couple talks down here in Pittsburgh a couple times to some other groups that I was able to give even more intimate insights into what I go through with vision loss and others in sort of the broader community. So that's my experience with it. My motivation for it was to just spread general awareness, because I'm 32. I was diagnosed when I was 2, been legally blind for 25 years now, and really never had a conversation with anybody else with RP until I was in my 20s. So it meant a lot to me to kind of throw my stuff out there and kind of just sharing what I've been sharing with people all throughout my entire life, but for sort of like a greater good, instead of just kind of being my own advocate. So that's my story.
That's great.
Story
Thanks,
about my
Eric.
story. Yeah.
Brenda, do I notice your hand up as well?
Yeah, I also am technologically challenged in raising my hand virtually, but I would also, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with, and maybe you already know this, but I participated in the Aspect program through Prevent Blindness, which that whole program is focused on how to tell your story effectively and then use that to advocate. So I believe they're taking applications now if anybody's interested, but not only do you kind of perfect your story, but then you learn how to share that with lawmakers and decision makers and how that influences legislation related to vision. So just a little side note, if anybody's interested, it's through Prevent Blindness.
That's a great plug. And so if people just reach out to their Prevent Blindness, the general, and just ask for that, that's how you got connected?
Yeah, actually, see, I work at Center for Independent Living, and so I get connected through, I do our information and referrals. So I get a lot of things to disseminate out, and a lot of it is really relevant to me. And I found it really helpful, a confidence booster, and you know, that first few times it's a little unnerving, but you find out how quickly you get comfortable with it, and nobody's a better expert on you than you. So, you know, you never know which little detail of your life might impact somebody else. And it might seem unimportant to you when you're telling your story and you're like, why did I put that in there? But it'll strike a chord with somebody and make a connection. So
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
sure. And yeah, if anybody wants me to, I can get that website, and the contact person, Julie Gertzmarker is her name. So
Perfect. Jake?
Hi there. I'm Jake, president of Iowa, and I just had to a little bit talking about kind of how I shared my story. Pretty much started, I want to say maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. My dad was running a Boston Marathon, and I spoke at a mass Ioneer event, and I was like, hey, I like this. So I kind of continued doing that, and after a while, I started speaking at some Foundation Fighting Blindness events. I spoke at some in Chicago, spoke down in St. Louis, and I more so just share my story as a way to just kind of like motivate other individuals, because I know not everyone is super open with sharing their story, and kind of seeing, I guess, someone who's a little bit younger going up in front of a crowd and kind of sharing their experiences, their story. Like numerous times when I get off stage, stop talking, numerous people come and be like, hey, I really like when you said this. I really appreciate you saying that. And kind of those moments, I was like, hey, I want to keep doing this. And I was even a part of like the Foundation Fighting Blindness Share Your Vision campaign last year. And that was a lot, that was incredible, a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jake, for sharing, and thanks for another plug for our Share Your Vision campaign. I'm hoping we'll have everybody take part in it this year, since we have so many good experiences.
Of course.
Great. Well, I know we have about 10 minutes left in our scheduled call. So if anyone has any other comments or questions or things they want to share, feel free to do so. If not, we'll give you some time back.
Bailey, this is Dan again. I sent you an email yesterday or the day before, I forget. I don't know whether this is appropriate to mention it here or not, but you know this was regarding the support group facilitator we have and the training. I thought it was kind of interesting because she was in this webinar with Rebecca Alexander. Is it kind of too early to talk about what's going on there, or do you know, or what?
I'm trying to reference your email.
Okay, well, here I'll give you the quick backstory. So the lady that's our facilitator for our support group here, she's a trained counselor, and she attended a webinar, and she didn't tell me how she heard about the training, but the webinar was, I think, for people who were trained counselors. And when the training is done, apparently there's some program they're going to put it in place where people will have a page they can go to get a resource to talk to someone. It sounded almost like kind of like Peer Guide that we tried last year, but it was this seemed to be more to people already trained in that area. So I don't know if you know much about that or what's going on there, or maybe it's too early to be talking about it. So I don't know. That's why I asked.
Well, Dan, you've kind of plugged a secret project that we've been working on here at the foundation. But it's very timely though. So yes, we will be starting to provide some more resources along the lines of mental health. So that will be formally more so announced in May, alongside of the mental health webinar that we're going to be doing. So yes, very exciting. It is, like Dan said, that we are, building out some structure of that. It's not going to be tied to the previous Peer Guide program that we were working on about a year or so ago. This will be more of a standalone initiative. But yes, I am very excited about it. I think that it is a nice response to a lot of the outreach that we hear from the community around needing connections to these resources. So yes, more to come. But Dan, I'm glad that Rebecca Alexander seemed eager and excited about the program.
Great. Thanks, Bailey.
Yeah, of course. Jill?
Hi, this is Jill from the Pacific Northwest. Hearing Jake and Lindsay talk brought up a memory for me that it's really, for someone who might not be comfortable sharing their personal story or personal connection, I've always found it really easy to say what I'm doing, what I'm active in. So I'm raising money for Vision Walk, and I'm walking with a group of friends. And that's enough for most people. And if it's someone who they hear the word Vision Walk or they hear Vision Connection, they'll ask more if they want to know more. And it may resonate with people, again, that you don't even realize. So there are ways when you're not comfortable about making about yourself or disclosing the who or the why to still share what you're doing.
That's great. Thanks, Jill. Great. Well, so thank you all so much for sharing your personal experience with sharing your story. A huge shout out again. Thank you, Lindsay and Frank. I know that sharing a story can be very vulnerable. So coming onto a call with 40 some people, I really appreciate you all taking the time to do that. So in terms of next steps, so we will have our regional field assistant send out the recording to everybody so that if there was any content you wanted to revisit, that you can do so. And our next call will be in April on the 16th. So we hope to be able to continue our conversations then. But other than that, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Bailey.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bailey.